Hello, hi, good evening, everyone. It's us again, the Lucent Asset Management team. Today, as usual, we have Daniel, Terry, Adrian, and also Richard on the team here together with us. Just a very brief introduction once again. We are a bunch of people who are very passionate about investment. And what we love to do is on a monthly basis, we dissect a handful of companies and to rip apart their annual reports and also to experience the company, hopefully also on the inside out. What we do is we love to do this thing called scuttlebutt. That means to experience the company at best, but also to be able to understand whether or not the company is a company that is worth for us to invest. The topic today that we'll be focusing on is about management. What are the top three things to see if the management is aligned with you as a shareholder or as an investor? Now, very often from time to time, you see as management team, there is a possibility that they may be only looking at their own interests or their own pocket. Therefore, if you are not sensitive as an investor to invest in this kind of company, chances are you may be potentially wasting your time putting your money with companies like this that do not give a lot of attention to shareholders' interests. Yeah, so today there's a few things that we want to share and discuss. Maybe the first question that I would like to throw to Terry is this. Terry, what in your opinion, right, how do we evaluate a corporate structure of a company to understand whether or not this management team is aligned with shareholders' interests? And maybe you would like to touch and talk a little bit about the management's compensation and also the percentage of their shareholding and commitment in the company.
Sure, definitely. Thanks, Darren, for inviting me for sharing. First of all, I'm quite particular about the figures that is shown in the annual report, which is demonstrate a certain portions that the management would like to show to the investor. Basically, when I went to assessment in terms of management, very obviously, the most surface level that normally investor can assess is to have a look how do their structures, their remuneration in terms of their to the management and board of director itself. Generally speaking, it would be advisable for normal investor to browse to it and see in at least 3 to 5 years times is how does the company compensate their own top employee. And in of course, different countries have a different kind of policy that you might see different percentage in terms of the remuneration of the employee itself versus to the whole revenue on the year. And normally in a certain country, you will see there's a certain plan on it, which is the first thing. And the second thing is normally what I will see is based on browse through the annual report, what is the actually keywords and the directions has been pointed out by the leader, which is normally will be the CEO or the key person, chairman inside the company. And normally I would like to follow up in the coming years is what are they spoke or what are they has been mentioned in the previous years, fiscal years or annual report. Is this are they really make it happen and reflected in the coming years with full of effort? And this is the way that I will see whether they are really taking a long-term effort and whether are they really focusing on their alignment in terms of their goal. So this is how I look on it.
So Terry, you mentioned about peculiarities or certain preference or certain standard in terms of percentage of compensation based on a particular country. Can I throw you one question? Would you also benchmark and compare it with its own industry instead of the country in itself, and which would hold a heavier weight in terms of percentage of compensation, benchmark against its country or according to its own industry, which is an approach that you think is slightly more effective to understand whether or not the management is really overpaying themselves?
First of all, I will to be look at the both perspective, both country and also the industry, because from my own experience, it is quite weird at the first time when I see that, okay, in this kind of industry, in let's say talk about in Malaysia, the percentage in terms of compensations to the top management inside the company will be, let's say, will be like between certain threshold in terms of the percentage level. But start to cross about to the other country and I look on it again on the same industry, it tends to turn out that the percentage in terms of the remunerations tends to be differs. So this is why I experienced.
Would you be able to give something more precise, like a specific figure that you feel that would be?
There are few, not say many, but there are few, let's say about 2 to 3 companies which I found that their compensation levels in terms to their key employees tends to be higher in the percentage. Somewhere is between above 20%, is somewhere around between 20 to 35%. So, and for this is kind of the hard to judge when you are just looking on company, because it might give you a perspective. Oh, okay, that company is growing, and this kind of percentage it seems like okay because with the local family in terms of management. But if you really compare with same industrials, you will find that okay, go to different kind of a company, but their company also performs quite well. And instead, if you look on the management itself, they are quite humble in terms of the compensations to the management is. Yeah, so I would say it's depend on the situations.
But would you agree with me also, right, that sometimes as an organization, it is not wrong to incentivize certain key employees of a company so that they can continue to drive good value and good results for the shareholders, right? So what would be your comment on that? And how would you specify the percentage of a shareholding of these key players, such as either the founder themselves or even the key employees, right? What would be the percentage where you would define as having a high level of commitment in the level of ownership towards the company?
Well, very good and challenging questions to me. Like I would like to say is the compensations levels. I will just answer your second questions first. First of all, in terms of the compensations levels, right? I personally feel that if if the company pays a key persons, probably will be between 30 to 40%. Just focusing on that particular person alone, I might feel that I will require to have more assessment in terms of whether these key persons is really contribute to as a key growth driver on the company itself. And like what are you saying is like quite aligned, which is quite true in terms of on some company, right? It is that kind of the 1 or 2% which is really contribute to the long-term growing that you are will be quite reflected in terms of the number, in terms of the annual report across the years. I didn't deny on that, and that is another way of perspective looking on it.
Yeah. Okay. And if you don't mind me asking, Adrian, the next question I would like to direct to you, because it concerns a little bit more towards the number side. And knowing that you've been in banking and finance and also very deeply rooted in the area of investment for the longest time in the past 1 to 2 decades, what would be your experience and observation towards the same question, the percentage of holding, right? Shareholding, where you define it as a high level ownership. And if, listen to this very carefully, what if the founder has a slightly smaller percentage, but yet on top of him, a certain particular institution has a much larger percentage? It could be a bank, it could be a conglomerate of a whole company that is not directly related to the founders. What would be your perception towards this kind of structure? Will there be some form of conflict of interest, and would it be less ideal of a situation for shareholders?
Actually, how to say, toward my journey in investing, right? The process is keep on evolving. I would say in the latest my mental model, in the latest situation, I would say actually I'm not really care about how much shareholding is the management team holding. Instead, I would want to observe how the management grow the company, or what is how they manage the operation day to day in the company. That is much more important than how much shareholding in the company, because in the whole world, especially the US, right, the management tend to have lesser shareholding in the company one. Some are even less than 1%. So, but in this case, then if you say if this management, this CEO have less than 1% in the company, then I would not invest in it because he doesn't have the skin in the game. But in this case, if you filter like this, right, technically I would say you will filter mostly like maybe 80% of the company of US already. So shareholding is just a way to look, but it's not definitely like absolutely way to filter out whether the management skin in the game or not. For me, I would rather, if you say number, I would rather observe carefully how is the management capital allocation toward the company. Because what you observe in all the financial statement when the annual report is out, or financial or earning call is out, right? When you observe carefully the number, right, it actually tell how is the management thinking and how is it behave in the company one based on this number. From raising fund, whether from raising from bank, borrowing, internal financing, or even from new share issuance from shareholder, to how they grow the company, or whether they invest in working capital, capex, or just return cash, or M&A. All this little action tell little things one. So for me, like it's not so simple. It's not so directly for a checklist like this memang pass, this fail or not. It's all the mini decision make up the management, and this is also one of the way I look at how the cash flow of the company, how they flow in, flow up, and what is the strategy. I think this is much more important than the shareholding and the compensation structure. But just like what Terry is saying, compensation structure is important, but also I want benchmark it like a fixed percentage. Compensation structure is I will want to assess how this compensation arrive. Like whether you are benchmark again profit, maybe you can grow your profit by how many percent this year, then you get this kind of bonus or compensation, or you are based on share option, or maybe you are based on how many years of project, because 1 year up in revenue doesn't mean continuously 3 years, 5 years up in revenue. What if this project is only profitable for 1 year, but next year is a loss making? Then this CEO get a high compensation package this year, then he resign already. Then the following year, the company in hell wire already. That's why it's also have to see all this structure, whether from 3 years, 5 years, based on revenue, ROE, a lot of things to say. There is no fixed answer for me. But it's I just giving there's a general rules, the compensation structure, the capital allocation, and also the track record. These three things are for me.
So I hear you on some of the essence of how an ideal management team should be managing an ideal situation in a company with reference to, first of all, efficacy of project management, efficacy of capital allocation, and also from the perspective of maybe over a period of 5 to 10 years, culturally, how consistent have they been portraying themselves as a team? Can I further clarify, right? Would you agree with me if there is almost a direct correlation between the size of the company or the size of the business versus the percentage of the compensation to the management team? Why am I asking this is because would you argue with me, right, or debate with me that typically for a lot of these American companies, they are quite sizable and potentially even very big in the whole of US and APAC region, and if not globally, which is why the size and the proportion of their compensation or even shareholding is typically smaller.
Yes, one of the things I agree is yes, because of size of the company does matter, and also in US, right, especially towards much more developed country, not to say towards developing or emerging, much more developed country, right, the chance of the institutional investor much more the participation rate much more higher. It's much more higher. That's why in this country, right, you won't see it's more of an institutional or a company name holding much more than the individual shareholding.
Right. Actually, based on your understanding, why is it that the developing country or the less advanced country, the institutional holding is typically less? What do the banks in this developing country invest in?
This has to go back to the individual company from political economy and also the capital market, the maturity of the capital market. Because in emerging country, right, the market is not so open to all of the international. So there is a capital imposed from foreign country, and also maybe in local there is doesn't have so much institutional investor. Therefore, it's only like maybe because by country like for example India or China, right, the bank has much more saying power than the institutional investor. Whereas in US, right, maybe the institutional investor has much more say than the bank. That's why in all these different corporate governance and capital market, right, you can see the financing structure. Usually a company in Japan or China, right, that tends to has higher borrowing instead of the equity share. Whereas in US, right, it's much more anything also IPO instead of borrow from bank.
Right. On this note, just an interesting question. What do you think about the latest trend of certain startup company which love to raise funds from the public and from the public as in the individual investors rather than going to the banks? From this kind of company growth, and yet they are listed. What is your perception towards this kind of company, especially with reference to certain type of company nowadays that love to burn cash and then they will just keep burning cash in order to grow and gain market share? How would you describe the positioning of this kind of company for shareholders?
It's still yes and no. How to say? All these startup company, they go for IPO, right? The reason they go for IPO, some of them is like what you say mentioning just now, because of they are burning cash and they are still loss making. They do not have cash flow so they don't seek for bank borrowing, because bank borrowing they need to pay the fixed interest cost. They cannot pay because they still loss making. They can't even pay for the bank. That's why instead they go and raise for IPO. So all this company IPO, they are still loss making. But in terms of how you say positioning, right, I think it's still go back to how you assess the management, whether the business model makes sense or not, whether this cash funding strategy makes sense or not. It's still go back to that.
Yeah. So in this kind of situation, it's still quite tough to say whether or not this management team have the shareholders' interest at heart, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, because there's not enough track record per se, Yeah. So having said this, you don't mind me asking this question, Daniel? Having mentioned this note, how would you evaluate the portrayal of the management team to public, not just for very well established, maybe even regional or global companies, but also I would love to hear your perspective when it comes to those startup that are still burning cash, not super well established. How do you think the management team should be positioning and portraying themselves to reflect that they have shareholders' interests at heart?
Okay. Well, I think the angle would be from an investor, or I believe what we want out of this company, either startup or established one, is the return of capital. So for example, in a startup whereby, take for example, startup that you're burning lots of cash. Okay, I mean, the investor definitely knows that you can't hide the numbers, right? So it's definitely burning cash. So as a management, you can probably portray more confidence towards your business directions, and that's one, but not all. And perhaps for a company that's burning cash, perhaps a little bit plan onwards to actually generate free cash flow, in a sense, because yeah, you continue burning cash, but for how long? That's definitely a question that we would ask, and then management will definitely need to tackle that. And not to mention also to actually elaborate a bit on background history through news or what. I think that will help to actually convince the investors onto this team of management. Despite burning cash, that they are seeing that this team of management behind there, they are burning cash for some reason. They are burning cash to actually build their business, say 5 to 10 years ahead of others. And that's why you need to burn cash now. You need to use the cash to invest in assets that can allow your business to propel in 5 to 10 years later. Yeah. So that's what I think for a startup that's burning cash, that at least one of the way that the management can portray themselves. And for those that's more established one, I believe that we look as investors, we look quite a bit on these capital allocations. So now you have a lot of cash, okay, and you have profit margins, and then you may want to show a bit of your shareholding a bit, but what tends to be is that they could have a little bit of shareholdings by then, because you need to keep the share outstanding to be liquid. Yeah. So it comes back to how you are allocating your capital. Are you putting your capital into generating more return? I mean, some part of it, actually a lot of it, Adrian has mentioned, but main key thing is that, are you putting your capital to generate more returns into project that is beneficial, not just in 1 or 2 years, but perhaps in 3 to 5 years or even more? Are you putting the capital in the right way? So as investors, you want to put more eyes onto how the management are spending their money, either M&A or investing in new technology, and does this make sense for the business? Simply said, as an investor, if you're investing in a business, would you want to be partner with this team of management? And would you want to do business with this team of management given the opportunity? If yes, then very likely they are aligned with you and with your interests and with your style. Yeah, that's what I would say, Darren.
Right. So tactically, right, if you are a retail investor and you do not have the capability to command so much attention from the management team, how would you be able to, in real tangible steps of actions, right, be able to find out, some of these things, whether or not the management team, it has some strategic planning for the next 3 to 5 years, whether or not they are spending their capital allocations in the wisest manner? What would you do in order to keep yourself abreast of the progress of the company?
Yeah, thanks for the good questions. This is as a retail investor, even like me, yes, we definitely do not have the privilege of just knock the door beside and talk to the management. Hey, what are you gonna do for the company the next day, or the next year? Just talk or call up like that. So because we're not friends, right? So yeah, one of the thing is definitely you can buy a lot of shares. One lot, sorry, not a lot. One lot of shares.
Okay.
Yeah, one lot of shares, and just attend the AGM. And
Right.
what do you do in the AGM, right? So imagine that you're going to a party and you want to get to know this VIP. Okay, now the guy that you want to get to know, the CEO, is your VIP. So how do you get to know a person? All right, it simply say, how do you make friends? How do you know that this friend is trustworthy? Yeah, so then you will need to use this kind of common sense, right? It's kind of human. So I try to elaborate a bit. So it's something like you want to gauge whether you can trust this person. You want to gauge, and not just trust, you want to know whether this person is on the verge of retiring. He's sitting on this board just to gain more compensation and to sit chill there, and not much energy to drive the company forward lah, simply say. Or is he someone that has dreams ahead, 10 years, 20 years, and maybe 30 years ahead, despite his age 40? Yeah, and he's still so energetic, so much of plan ahead, that so much of things to do, and still sometimes sleepless. Okay, this sort of impression. And of course, you yourself, you have to do your own due diligence as well. You have annual reports, you have news channels, you have transcripts, and even newspapers. Sometimes major developments by a company, say M&A, or opening a new factory, or a breakthrough in a technology, AI related, whatever related, or new product launch, they could surface in the newspaper, and you could actually catch these points and try to think, does this make sense for this business? Is it making sense to have the business launch this new product? Okay, I go a little bit too detail. Let's zoom out a bit. Does it make sense for the company to go in this direction to launch this product in the longer run? Do they have a lot of competitors in the roadway? Perhaps there is, and how do they deal with it? What's so special about this product? Why are they solving? Right.
So if you don't mind me interrupting, to simplify what you just mentioned, right? Number one, the important thing is, as a retail investor, we should attend the AGM in order, number two, to get some form of sensing, like an organizational sensing towards the profiling, the personality of the management team, whether they are trustworthy, whether they are genuine, whether they are sincere in doing what they do, in preaching what they preach, and also putting money where their mouth is. And number three, you want to then be able to interpret subsequently after the AGM whether they do what they say they will do, right? These are the three main things that you mentioned, how we can interpret whether the management is actually aligned with the interests of the shareholders.
Yep, I think you sum it up very well. You sum it up very well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you pointed out something very interesting. And the next question, if you don't mind, Terry, I'm just gonna direct it to you, because I personally also believe when we perform scuttlebutt, right? Scuttlebutt, which means we want to experience not just the product and the service of the company that we are experiencing, but also scuttlebutting the management team. And the reason why I'm asking you this next question is because of your skill in the area of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, in the area of organizational psychology, and your understanding towards management psychology, right? From your perspective, usually, what are the top 3 obvious cues that you will be paying attention on or focusing on, especially when you attend an AGM, to understand whether or not the particular C-suite leader or the key stakeholder in the management team is actually consistent with what they preach, what they say, and is coming from their heart and not just their mind?
First of all, thanks for throwing these questions to me. Okay. From my own experience, I have indeed attended AGM for the same company for years. And the what I experience is that it actually goes back to the personality on the person itself, whether the sincerity is there when he's in his way to responding to the ground when the question has been told to the key management. First of what it is, and then second thing is, if let's say there are really some tough questions or which is some kind of the question has been raised by floor, which is there's some challenge in terms of answering or responding. If a management is really have a visions and passionate in what they are doing, and you will basically see that what has been response either really relevant to what is the questions on the ground, or whether it's like it might be not how to say, it might be not completely comprehensive answer to be satisfying the how to say the public or the ground, but you can sense the sincerity, and so far the management is trying their hard to running the company for the years.
Right. In other words, what you are looking at is whether or not are they stuttering, or are they thinking too long in order to formulate the answer, or does the answer come spontaneously, naturally, right? Because if I'm hearing you correctly, if they have been true to what they have been doing, the answer should come out quite naturally, right? It shouldn't be in a situation where they struggle to think, to formulate an answer on the spot when you throw them a curveball, correct?
Yes, because when you are actually in the live situation, you are actually responding to the ground. The way that you respond, the tone and the sounds, that how you respond to the ground, it actually reflects your perspective and also your stand, your missions towards when the moment you're founded or the moment you are actually from day to day you are running the company. Normally, most of the persons that you can sense from the key persons.
I see. Now, the next question, I would like to direct it to Richard. Richard, as a very successful entrepreneur yourself, would you agree with me? Sometimes as a management team, an effective management team, there is a situation where, depending on the age of the business, they need to be able to strike a proper balance between focusing on the company's interest versus shareholders' interest. And typically during startup phase, would you agree with me that usually the focus of the management has to be on the business itself before shareholders? And depending on your answer, the next question is, does it mean then, there's a particular age of a business where it will be in the best interest of the shareholders to invest in? What's your perspective on this?
Can you hear me, Darren?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Let me go straight to the point. There is one part where you mentioned where, sorry, there's an echo. Could someone mute first? Okay. There is one point that you mentioned. So what happens for an entrepreneur when we need to decide whether or not we need to consider so-called business first or shareholder first? If you ask me, more often than not, they are one and the same. Whereby, especially in the startup phase or during the early stages, usually the founder is usually one of the majority stake in the company. So what they focus on is actually to grow the company. But in terms of, maybe you're saying like, is it for the returns-based approach whereby they're focusing on, can they pay the shareholders or themselves, as early as possible? Then in that aspect, normally a true business owner will focus on growing the business first, because usually business owners are actually long-term players. They don't really aim for short-term things. So that in that aspect, we as entrepreneurs, we should actually focus on growing the business as until a point where perhaps it's slowing down. Then only we start to consider how to allocate our resources elsewhere. But as a true entrepreneur, usually it's really rare you actually think about yourselves first. So if for those, I personally call them sham or scam. They are not true entrepreneurs, but they're actually just into benefiting themselves. Yes. Did I answer your question, Darren?
Yeah, I think as you are sharing, what pops up on my mind is there was a speech that Jack Ma gave. He said that, consistent with what you shared, that as true long-term player or business owner, their focus is on the business, because he said that during good times, shareholder will stand together with you, but during bad times, shareholders will disappear. So I think that kind of concurs, right? When you mention in your word that a true business owner should stay very focused on their business, and not just making decisions based on the wants and desires of the shareholders for long-term sake and long-term growth and prosperity. But having said this, right, just playing devil's advocate, does it mean then, especially for startup owners who get their companies listed, it is a less ideal situation for shareholders to be investing in this kind of company? What would be your opinion in this kind of a situation?
So this one is pretty straightforward for me. In every investment, what we're trying to do is to invest in the future, future earnings, future growth, in the future of the company, essentially, in short. So if an investor is looking to invest in a company early, they're actually considering whether or not this company will grow in the future. Simple as that. If the investor is looking to, just think for their own perspective of, okay, I invest in you, I need to get some kind of return as soon as possible, then I don't think this kind of investor will be suited for this type of investments anyway. So it's part and parcel number one, the investor themselves, what kind of person are they, and what kind of expectation do they have? There are different investors in the world, and I've seen, even in institutional ones or in the hedge funds themselves, there are those that are very geared towards growth. They don't mind. So more often than not, they classify themselves moving towards either hedge fund investors or moving towards VCs, venture capitalists. So they themselves are also usually entrepreneurs or long-term investors, and then they will invest, and they might not be able to see their returns for maybe 5 or 10 years, because that's maybe how long a company will mature before they go for IPO. So for such a long duration that you cannot see any return at all, and there is a big risk that it goes into zero, then I think it really depends on what's the investor type.
I see. I think you've just pointed out something very interesting for our audience to think about, because there's this saying that it takes one to know one. And before we even assess the direction of the management team that we are analyzing, it's important for us to know ourselves, whether or not our desires, our risk appetite, our investment profile suits the kind of management profile that we are looking at. So there are those who look for short-term wins, there are those who look for long-term wins, and there are those who want to see quick monetary return. There are those that purely philosophically want to invest in the betterment of the society's future with the development of better product and services for mankind, for example. Yeah, so it really depends on what the respective investors are looking at the same time before they even choose to invest. Am I right to sum it out in such a way for you, Richard?
Yes, definitely. In short, if you think like a business owner, you are usually a very good investor. So normally what this world is doing is that they think like an investor, and then they think they want to be a business owner, and then they claim that they are very well versed in business, but they are actually the opposite. They just want to focus on gains. So if like you said, talking about those products, and then you want to benefit mankind and stuff like that. If we think of it in a very simple term, if you are able to create some kind of product that actually can benefit mankind in the long term, let's just look at it in terms of how a person like the famous Elon Musk thinks. So Elon Musk is kind of like a visionary, a dreamer, has all these attributes of thinking very long term. If a normal average investor, they will look at Elon Musk and they'll think, wow, it's kind of stupid, right? You think of things so far away. You're thinking of like moving to Mars and stuff like that. If you're a long-term investor, or if you think like a business owner like him, in terms of let's talk high chunk, big things, right? All the things that is developing in terms of electric vehicles, in terms of batteries, and digging tunnels, and also launching the space vehicles up to the Mars. Everything, his plan is actually to focus on moving humankind to the next level. That's something so big for one person to vision such a big thing. Then he goes into details where he's actually talking about how long the car should drive, what's the speed, and the battery life, all these small little things that he also focus on. If you really look at it that way, actually it's kind of no-brainer. Whatever the price it is, it's such a long-term thing, and if you can just hold it long enough, you will see your returns eventually. Yep.
Right. Adrian, if you don't mind, I'm just gonna ask the last question to you. I think we still have the 8 minutes together, right? So from your perspective, right, especially with businesses like what Richard just pointed out, like Elon Musk businesses that invest in the future of mankind, for society, for betterment of of how should I put it? Longevity of the human race. Longevity of the human race. How should an investor perceive or even evaluate that a company like this is aligned with shareholders' interests at heart? Not forgetting he's also a risk taker. I recall he mentioned something like he tried his SpaceX rocket, right? And if he failed for the third time, the company is just gonna go bankrupt. I remember he said something like that.
Okay, before I go to Elon Musk, I give a general statement first. I think most investors seek out superstar CEOs who can seemingly change the business overnight with a well-planned strategy. In essence, the investor believes that business transformation is the result of brilliant ideas and clever plans. One recent investor think great performance result from brilliant strategy is that it is often reported to seem that way in the popular business media. These storylines are popular for a couple of reasons. First, they are easy to write. Second, people enjoy story about fresh and charisma far more than story about CEO who grow their business through continuous improvement. So this article often contribute to increase the stock price as investors buy into the hope and dreams of the charismatic CEO. Investors tend to have short memory and they forget that many of these business eventually will be derailed in dramatic fashion later on. So what I want to really emphasize here is one investor need to determine if the management team you are investing in working on proving a concept before investing a lot of capital in, or whether it prefer to put a lot of money in all at once, hoping for a later big payoff. Proving concept does not need to be expensive. For example, I don't want. For example, even Netflix, mailed himself a CD in an envelope when he was developing the business. When the envelope arrived undamaged, he has spent only cost of postage to test one of the business key operational risks. I mean, what I want to say here is there are two directions. Some investors will like Elon Musk because of the very long-term vision, very long-term plan. But some other business also built on hundreds of small decisions. Some business is actually come from customer, meaning they not really form a long-term plan. The plan must be rigid, strategic, following the plan straightforward, very strictly. They actually throw in a product and let the customer try, and then let the customer shape the direction of the business. So if you say a longevity of shareholder interest, it's still, I think it's still back to maybe just now what we just saying also. It's still based back to the investor expectation and the risk appetite. Where if you fit into the Elon Musk case, whether the investor can foresee what Elon Musk can foresee, maybe in 30 years, 50 years, like this time horizon, or maybe the investor only seen Elon Musk in like maybe 3 to 5 years only.
I see. I think that's a wonderful advice and also quite a holistic perspective. So to summarize, dear beloved audience, we have covered quite two extremes of perspective. But the very first step that I think we need to know, even before we invest, is we need to know ourselves. What kind of investment are we looking for? And I think indirectly that also ties into where we are in life as a person. Are you a young person with higher risk appetite, or are you a much older person who doesn't have much time left on earth and your risk appetite is lower? That all depends on what you want to be able to see and how you define as, whether or not the management team is going to give you what you want. So I think that's the very first step. Now, the second step, of course, tactically, tangibly in terms of action plan, as what our brother Daniel has mentioned, right, is that you can attend AGMs, you can sense for yourself what kind of people are you dealing with in the management team, whether are they all united together as a team, or there's a sense of tension in the team where only one person can speak and the rest have to shut up, or when they speak, they are thinking too hard to formulate an answer for you and they are stuttering themselves and they are not genuine and they are just speaking from their head but not from their heart. It reflects whether or not they are actually carrying out the actions consistent to the vision and the belief system towards the business. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, of course, what we mentioned is we will still need to tear apart the annual report and to dissect whether or not the actions consequentially year on year is reflecting what they say they will do, to be able to track consistency in terms of action plans, and do they carry out the action plans? Are they effective? Are they successful in carrying out their action plans? So these are some of the main points on what we want to be able to see as the top 3 things, whether or not if the management is aligned with you. So ladies and gentlemen, I think this concludes, the discussion we have tonight on the topic of alignment of the management team. And we do this once in 2 weeks as a team that is very passionate to do investment and to understand deeply and to simplify the journey of investment for you. So stay tuned for our next topic, and do remember to subscribe to our channel, right, for the upcoming topics on investment. And if you would like to understand more about what we do, you can feel free to drop us an email. We will include the information at the below the description of the video. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us tonight. Hope to see you again sometime in the future. Goodbye.